Welcome back to Air Quality Matters. We already have the tools and knowledge we need to make a difference to the quality of the air we breathe in our built environment. The conversations we have and how we share what we know is the key to our success. I'm Simon Jones, and coming up, a conversation with Asit Kumar Mishra, Research Fellow in UCC, that's University College Cork. Asit is an experienced researcher who I've known for a while as a researcher in the built environment, looking into subjects right at the heart of ventilation and air quality. Currently working in public health and air quality in schools in Ireland, you can imagine we often have a lot to talk about. But it occurred to me, I've never really had anyone on the podcast to talk about research itself, not necessarily the output, but the role, how they find themselves doing this work, what drives them, gives them job satisfaction, and so on. It seems to me, at least, to be a real vocational role, something you were drawn into. So it was that I sat down to talk with Asit about. He has worked all over the world, with big names in big institutions to everything in between. It was a really fascinating insight into Asit's world, how he got here and what drives him. Recorded on location in the Great Hall in UCC, I really hope you enjoy this one. Please don't forget to check out the sponsors in the show notes and at airqualitymatters.net. This is a conversation with Asit Kumar Mishra. I think we'll naturally talk about the work you're doing, but I thought the nice angle today was about researching. About the life of a researcher, the process of researching, some insight for somebody that's done it internationally over many years in different environments, looking at different topics, all within the built environment. So, pertinent to the audience of the podcast. But I just thought that would be a really nice approach to try and work through it, because we're always talking about the outcomes of the research. We very rarely talk about the process of the research itself, and you kind of get glimpses of it when you're talking to people mid-research. But invariably the output is a paper or some further research or something. We don't often talk about the job of researching itself. How long have you been researching, or researcher, quote unquote, now, do you reckon?
Including my master's, I would guess close to 20 years now.
20 years?
Yeah.
And outside of the textbook definition of what a researcher is, how would you describe it? Like if someone was thinking, like if you were talking to a teenager thinking about the kind of careers that they were looking at, how would you describe research to them in general, do you think?
That's a difficult question. It's something that you kind of start to do out of inertia at a certain point, because you enjoy a certain topic, because you enjoy going deeper into that topic. And then the rest of it sometimes, like at least in my experience, it kind of organically works out that you wanted to figure out something about this, and then you got a bit deeper, and then you see that okay, there is this kind of challenge there, or this kind of problem that a certain user is facing. So how do I address that? And you're continuing on that path because you are interested in it, you're inquisitive about it. And at some point you come out with some findings which might be relevant to a user, or some relevant to other colleagues that are working on a similar field. And so that's essentially kind of research.
So you kind of fall into it. It's one of these things, very few people set out to be a researcher as such. What are they? They're generally studying within a certain discipline.
In my case, it would have been engineering. So I did my undergraduate in engineering, and because at that point of time already I knew that I liked to be in this domain, like science, maths, from your school days, and then you figure out, okay, engineering is a nice place to be. It has applied aspects to it, and specifically in India, the engineering colleges, they generally give you a pretty good exposure to the different possibilities that you might have. Like I have friends from engineering days who are in administrative services, who are business, like they set up their own business, who are writers, they have their own TV show and quite successful with it. So you have a very different kind of mix of people there. So it's a nice exposure to come in contact with all this different kinds of friends, colleagues, classmates over that time. So that's one of the reasons why I chose engineering. And then, look, okay, engineering is technical, so I was a mechanical engineer by training. And then you start focusing on specific aspects. Like during my undergraduate, I was focusing on kind of by choice and by kind of an inclination, by an attraction on aspects related to thermodynamics and heat and mass transfer. So those things, when you go up a bit, then that leads to things like ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, so this aspect. And then those things, as you go to a PhD, that translates towards buildings. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a circuitous journey of how you end up researching about buildings from being a mechanical engineer.
So would it be fair to say most researchers' first exposure to research proper is during PhD? Do you think?
No, I think
No?
for a few that it might have also been during their school life, and for most it would be during the like 3rd or 4th years of their undergraduation.
Okay.
So by that time, because there will be kind of a topic that you might be working on for your graduation project, so you get some idea, like, do you like researching on that? It's not supposed to be something dramatic or add something dramatic to the existing literature, but it's just something like, it could be something that someone else has done, but I'm trying to recreate it as part of my graduation project.
Yeah.
But that gives you an idea that is this something I could feel good about doing, but in more detailed or in more innovative situations, working on something more innovative than just replicating someone else's work.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that. And I guess at that point in education, it's the first chance you've really had at a bigger scale to apply the knowledge you've been learning all the way through school and college. And now you're towards the end of college, you're starting to take on a project and starting to, even if you're trying to replicate something that's been done before, you're going through the process of research
Exactly.
and the application of science or engineering or whatever it is you're doing. And do you think the success or failure of that first exposure to the application of the knowledge is very important on whether somebody can see a path in research? I can imagine if your first exposure to practical application of the knowledge you've been learning in college is a disaster, or your teacher is poor, or you get given a topic that you're not comfortable with or you don't enjoy, I imagine that colors your view of the application of knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And as you mentioned, one of the more important factors would be the teacher or your supervisor. So it could be that whatever you are doing doesn't work out. But if you had someone, maybe a mentor, maybe your supervisor, maybe friends or even seniors who kind of gave you the idea that, yeah, it's not supposed to work out every time. It's okay if it doesn't work out, as long as you were able to kind of go through the steps, you are sure of what you have done, and maybe you get a negative result. That's okay. A negative result is sometimes also very highly
Welcome
sought
to
out.
science.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in fact, that's probably a good setup for most of the rest of your career, is
Yeah,
getting used to abject failure of thinking you know what's going on and then realizing you don't.
yeah. It's like I've been thinking about what like we discussed earlier, that we'll be talking about the process of research. So that is thinking that, okay, here also there is that Pareto 80-20 principle. Like 80% of your time will be spent on getting 20% of the work done. And if you can survive that, then you can use the other 20% to do the rest 80% of the work. Yeah, and so like most of the days, like probably 60 to 80% of the days will not end up as you expected them to go, will not have the results that you expected. at those points, it's good to have that kind of passion or that interest in something that you're doing. So then you can go through it, go past it to the 20% of the days when things actually work out brilliantly.
Yeah. And in those early days when you were coming out of college, you were starting to look at things like PhDs, how important were the people that were around you in signposting the art of the possible? Were you exposed to other researchers, professors, people in internationally in different fields, conferences, those kind of things where you went, this is a world I like, I can see myself here?
So in my case, I guess it was slightly different. So after my undergraduation, I did my master's in the US, but that was kind of just before the 2008 crash. So at that point of time, like I tried to have a job in the US for a year or so, but market wasn't very good. Came back to India, and when in India, I started teaching in a local university, and that's where I realized that I like being in this academic environment, teaching students. There, I had a colleague who was working on something quite different. So he was working on biofuels for diesel engines. So we did a couple of works together. So I thought, okay, if I'm gonna stay in this environment, I need a PhD. So let's get a PhD done. So I came back to the university where I did my undergraduate from. And during that time, it was really nice to have my PhD supervisor, Professor Ram Gopal. So he gave me a lot of freedom as to what I could work on. Like the topic I worked on, he didn't have any other students working on that topic. I mean, it was related to air conditioning and ventilation, which he has knowledge on, but he didn't have any other existing projects in that discipline. But because I wanted to explore that area, he gave me a lot of freedom and guidance on, like, especially letting me know that, okay, don't proceed down this rabbit hole. so
Yeah.
so, so that was a good pairing or good combination to have. And so that's where I guess this thing started off, like trying to, like, initially the idea was probably to do some building energy simulations, but I got diverted into the idea of, like, how are buildings being designed? Like, what are the relevant standards for thermal comfort? Like, what says that this air conditioning has to be at 23 or 26, or heating has to be at 21 or 20? So that's where I came into, okay, what are the relevant standards for a naturally ventilated classroom in India, which isn't much explored? Or like, and is it something that will follow the pattern for, let's say, or the standards for air conditioned classroom in Texas, or would it be something different? So that's where I went into this idea of, like, looking into people and buildings together instead of just a systems aspect of ventilation and air conditioning. That's where I got involved with occupants and occupant needs, occupant comfort, health, and performance, etc.
And what do you think at that time stopped you from just teaching and pursuing a teaching career in university? Was it this that was this within your DNA that you just had questions that you wanted to answer, that's the way you but is that how it works for a lot of researchers, that they find themselves in academia in some form or
Mm.
other, whether in the PhD environment, maybe doing some part-time teaching while they're
Mm.
doing it and so on? And do you kind of have to make a choice at some point that my focus is going to be research and I might do some teaching, or my focus is teaching and I might do a bit of side research? Or do you find people tend to go one way or the other at
Uh,
some point?
in most, like, most of the larger universities, it's difficult to have a clear distinction. You will have commitments both ways.
Yeah.
I mean, teaching, or at least student supervision, and as well as research and leaving apart the administrative stuff. So it's difficult to have a clear distinction amongst people in the university system. Sometimes you might have uh, like the technical universities, sometimes you might have a more clearer distinction between what people are doing, if they're uh, focusing on teaching or uh, kind of training, or they are focusing on research. But it's more difficult to have a clear distinction like that.
Yeah.
So,
And do you do any teaching today? Is that still
no,
part? Are you
no.
almost
At
entirely focused on
here,
research?
it's mostly almost completely research, because right now I'm in the School of Public Health as an engineer, so there isn't really a subject I could teach to the
Yeah.
students there. There are some student supervision commitments still, but they are okay. They aren't really teaching in the classical
Yeah.
sense.
And what did you do your PhD in the end? What was the
Oh, so
what
the
topic?
title, if I remember vaguely, it was Thermal Comfort of Naturally Ventilated Classrooms in the Hot, Humid Climatic Regions of India.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and a subject that's still being discussed today. That one, I'd imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you'd finished your PhD, then was it a case of connections you'd made and research that you'd done led you off in certain directions, or were you sitting there after your PhD looking at posts online and thinking, where could I work? I mean, how did you go from that kind of, I guess, fairly common line to education to a PhD, doing some research, doing some teaching, to being the journeyman that you've been since, working all over the world, researching all sorts of topics in the built environment? How did you get from there to here?
So when it was kind of drawing close to thesis submission and defense, that was already starting to look around for positions, and specifically at that point of time, the idea was to have a postdoctoral experience, because that uh, helps to broaden your perspective and work in a different environment than you did your PhD in. So I work with different people, develop more connections as well. So at that point, I was looking around, and I got in touch with Marcel Lomans in Technical University of Eindhoven, TU Eindhoven, and there were commonalities in what the kind of work that I had done for my PhD, and so I had applied for that position, and that got through. So that's how I ended up in Eindhoven, and then I've been around a few places since then.
Yeah, we were discussing before the podcast a few days ago, and then you mentioned, I think, DTU at some point as well, I think, wasn't it? And
Yeah, so the
yeah,
order would be Eindhoven, Aalto University, Singapore, back to Galway. Then, as part of my current work, I'm a guest researcher. I was a guest researcher. Oh no, I am correct. Technically, I am, but I was in DTU in 2023 and 2024, and then I'm back now to UCC.
and what's a guest researcher?
So, a guest researcher is essentially someone the university is not paying for,
Okay.
but he has a he has a he can use the facilities, like he has access to the library, the lab, and he has a place to sit and work on.
Yeah.
So because the program works like this, and I guess a lot of Marie Curie co-funds also work similarly, that you have an outgoing phase, and but your host university would be, like in my case it was UCC. So throughout my contract, UCC handles all the administrative stuff, and for DTU it was just that I was going to be working there with Paul Wargoshli, and so their commitment was that they will provide me a space and let me have access to any facilities that I might need.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, that's interesting. But principally, you're employed by the
The host.
host
Yeah.
university. Yeah. And you say you've been doing this for nearly 20 years now, you reckon?
I included my master's degree
Yeah,
time
yeah,
as well,
yeah.
but I guess so. My PhD was defense was in August 2015, so just about 10 years now.
10
So,
years, yeah. I mean, well, these days, that's a long time in any discipline. It, what's the motivation for you personally in research? There must be something in this that you get out of it from a personal satisfaction perspective, because we'll come on to the process, but I imagine it's a grind at times trying to do the work. So sticking anything out for a decade or more means something's motivational in it. What do you think it is about research, or perhaps the discipline that you're looking into that keeps you coming back for more?
I guess in my case, it was good to have a topic which is so closely related to people. And there is often a very clear and direct impact of what we do on the life of people, or how a building might be designed, or how people might be operating their own homes. So that's what keeps me interested in this, and so helps me get through those 80% of the days. So knowing that uh, there can be quite direct impacts of whatever we find in this. I guess there was also an added inspiration during the pandemic, which is kind of an odd thing. But
Yeah.
so at that point of time, as you know, a lot of people were interested in air cleaning, ventilation, and so I was active on social media those days, and I have kind of dealt with people even one-to-one, as to someone had an infection in their home and they wanted to ask about how should I run a fan or may open windows to minimize the chances of others getting infected. Or someone had a elderly person in their home and they wanted to check what should I do, so that because I have to work, how should I make sure that I lower the chances of me infecting my parent or grandparent. So these are the kind of situations where you can very directly provide some of your knowledge from the findings that you know. Some of the findings that seem pretty simple and trivial until that point, but the kind of use it comes to be like the level at which it's useful to people, and the things that people can be grateful for. That's also an inspiration.
Yeah, and I guess the risk in research is a disconnect from outcomes or benefits or value that you're providing, and within your discipline of kind of buildings, energy saving, indoor air quality, that kind
Mm.
of thing, it is tightly connected to people's
Yeah.
perception and outcomes and experience of the built environment. So there is that person connection. I can imagine in research, if you're buried away in the back room looking at something that's very disconnected
Well,
from reality, not reality, but the real world,
and
um, that slog then must be very lonely, or could get lonely
yeah,
potentially.
I
Yeah.
guess they would have different motivators or different kinds of inspirations for them. And at the same time, maybe I'm fortunate that I work in a discipline where it is easy to stay motivated and easy to connect with the results of what we do.
Yeah. And how have you found the built environment community in general of researchers and engineers and business? Has it been quite a welcoming place to work in? Have you found it easy to connect with people and network and reach out?
Yeah, in general, it's a pretty humble and welcoming community. So yeah, it's easy to, it's not very hierarchical. So it's much more horizontal, and there are people at different levels of experience who would be happy to listen to you, happy to welcome you, happy to give their 2 cents on your ideas. So overall, it's a good experience. It's a good bunch of people to work with, and based on my discussions with colleagues who are in other disciplines, I know that it is not always so in every discipline. So it's not something that's
Well, they're welcome to life. You can just get unlucky, can't you? There's what do they say? There's assholes everywhere, and you just never know when you're going to meet one. Um, the overarching all of this, I mean, like we said, you've been in kind of energy saving and air quality and thermal comfort. Are there some big questions in that field that you feel compelled to look at and answer, or is it generally in the research and the stuff that you've found yourself involved in? Has it been much more specific than that, or are you kind of, is it driven by, for example, sustainability and energy savings? Is it driven by trying to answer health outcomes, or do you find interest in the detail? Is it something comes across your desk, or an idea, or a collaboration idea with a group of people that you go, yeah, that's what gets me going? Or is it something bigger than that that kind of motivates you, do you think?
At some level, I guess it's both. So, so when I did my PhD, the focus was that how do I look at a standard that would facilitate energy sustainable classrooms. During my first postdoc in Eindhoven, working with Marcel and Jan Hansen. So Jan Hansen is a pretty big name in buildings energy simulation. So at that point of time, it became clear that, okay, buildings are there primarily for occupants. Now, we don't want a building to be splurging energy or wasting energy, but at the same time, if it is necessary to keep my occupants comfortable and safe, I'll use that bit of energy. The building's responsibility is not to generate clean energy or not to be like the poster boy for energy conservation. As long as it's keeping the occupants comfortable and safe, it's probably contributing more, because sick people are a big energy intensive, like it's a big drain on energy. As we say, like one of the most energy intensive things we do is falling sick. So it involves a lot of resources. So if it can keep the occupants comfortable and healthy and productive, then it's doing plenty. So that's the overarching goal that I have had. Instead of focusing just on a sustainable building, like I could make an excellent sustainable building which is just a half of a spear, no openings, but that's not going to keep my people healthy or happy. And then there are certain opportunities that come up for collaboration, as you mentioned, so which kind of catch your eye. And like currently I am working as part of the Dorothy Coffin scheme, and the idea of the Coffin scheme was to have interdisciplinary research to address challenges of public health of the future. So one thing that I have found interesting in working with people from public health here at UCC is there are a certain like frameworks in public health which can be easily translated to studying indoor climate or studying even building energy usage. So which would make our research much more applicable, and it could make our results more robust. And at the same time, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is already something existing. So that's a nice kind of combination, cross-disciplinary cooperation, which is always attractive as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about that multidisciplinary aspect, that's the same in research as well, that there's different lenses that things are looked through from different disciplines that's very difficult to comprehend unless you're having discussions with those people. It was one of the most informative times for me, actually, was during the COVID period, working with public health people, starting to look at air quality through the risk lens, where you didn't have all the answers, and that you found certain parts of the environment were able to react very differently in a space where we didn't have answers, because they were used to working in that environment. Risk is a very different space to work in than absolutes and thresholds and those kind of things. So that's fascinating that you say that as well. How over the years, how have you found yourself doing certain research? So has it been that there's already a question being asked as part of a cohort or a group, and
Mm.
you're invited or apply to answer that question? Or sometimes have you thought of things that need answering and develop that research from scratch?
Mm.
Like, how's it generally work for researchers out in the world? Are they given research to do generally, or are you developing that research almost completely from scratch yourself
It
often?
would be a combination of both, and also it depends on what level are you at. So during PhD, you could have some initial input from your supervisor or colleagues or other professors in the group, and then you are supposed to build upon that to create something of your own. Uh, like during postdocs or as a researcher, so it could be, and it often is, that there is already a funded project which has certain specific goals, and because your research interests intersected with those goals, so you have been hired for that, and then you are supposed to focus on uh, like addressing those specific goals. Now you might have your own creative ways of how you decide to go from point A to point B, or how you're able to answer those research questions that were important for the project. So there's that kind of independence there, but at the same time there might be a framework that, yeah, there are certain deliverables that need to be achieved. At like as you grow in that, at my level, it's a combination of like, so there could be specific projects I'm working on with collaborators where there is a defined research question, which maybe we came up together as a group, or maybe they already had something going on and they have invited me in because there is a challenge that they faced where they know I have an expertise. Or it could be my own project, like the one that I'm working on currently, so which we developed from scratch, that okay, this is something that needs attention, like trying up public health and classroom designs or classroom indoor climate. So that's something then you work on your own. It could be something very small, like the project that we had in Denmark. So it was because I was going to be there for 18 months, so it was supposed to be a small project where we had to, the idea was that yeah, probably whenever we go to classrooms, the research is kind of becoming like helicopter research. Like we go in, we put in some sensors, we say that, yeah, this is going to monitor this, and then we take the data and go back. Sometimes there is also some feedback from the children. But in the process, like, what do the schools or the children or the teachers gain? Like, yeah, we can say that this will probably contribute to better standards for classroom design in the future, but what about those students in the classes that you visited? So we decided that, okay, let's make it more interactive. We'll just talk to the students. And the teachers were also interested, in the sense that they don't just come to talk about your research, talk to them also about what you do as a researcher and how do you become a researcher. So that's kind of inspiring them towards STEM related activities.
Yeah.
And then you can also introduce what you're doing, why you are doing it. So then you did that, made some measurements, went back with the measurements to the children and so showed them that, okay, this is how your temperature in your classroom varies, or how the CO2 in your classroom varies. And then got some feedback from them as to what they thought, why it might have varied this way, or like maybe the sun was shining, or maybe we left the classroom so that's why it has fallen, or one day the PM levels were high whereas the outdoor PM levels were low. Why is that? That was the single day in the entire 2-week monitoring period while the PM levels are high, and that's because apparently they were dancing in the classroom. Their children were dancing in the classroom, and we would never have realized that the PM levels were high because of that. We would have probably thought that there is something wrong with the sensor
Yeah.
if we didn't talk to the children.
Yeah.
And so that's how it panned out. I mean, it's probably not going to lead into any publications. That wasn't the goal. It was just to have this kind of more cooperative approach to studying indoor climate in classrooms, so that they don't feel that they're not part of the process. Or
Yeah. I guess there's always a balance there, isn't there? And I've had this conversation with Henry Burridge talking about the SAMI
Yeah.
project in the UK, where the challenges of citizen science and how much you get people involved in it, because sometimes your research is observational. You don't want them to react to the process that's going on, right? And other times, ethically, you may be obliged to let them know that certain environments aren't healthy and so on. So there's all these complex considerations. And that reminds me that's a good point. The kind of stuff that you're talking about there is kind of field research as well. And field research can be very different to lab research or theoretical research or whatever. Is that something you found yourself doing quite a bit of, the field work research? And is that why you get this good connection with people and their environments? Is that fair to say that a lot of your work has always been based on out there as opposed to in here?
Probably correct. So, but of course, it depends on certain situations, like where I am working, how much can I go out in the field. Like if I'm doing my work in when I was in Netherlands, there is a language barrier. Like I can't always go into the field and expect to be understood. So there are certain limitations like that which will be there. But yeah, I have done a fair bit of field research, like through my PhD and my postdoc days as well. It has its own challenges. Things don't always work out in the field as you expect them. It's not as controlled as in a lab environment. And but yeah, there is also the connection with the end users there. So
yeah, especially when you're dealing with things like kids and you see them come alive with the science that they, you see them develop an interest in something like that's an amazing thing to see. I think everybody gets a buzz when you see people engage with the science of what you're doing. I take it research, like many things in life, isn't an endless pot of money. So you're often having to make compromises and direct resources in certain directions and so on.
Yeah.
Is that something that comes with experience? Do you find when you're looking at a body of research that instinctively at this stage, you know what's going to be a dead end or what's going to be a pull on resources or how to efficiently get to what you need to get to? You were joking at the beginning about the 80-20 rule that you're going to, even when you know what you're doing, with this time you still spend 80% of your time doing 20% of the work. Like that's unavoidable, I take it. Yeah.
Sometimes, yes, like you have an idea of how to budget your money or budget your resources. Sometimes you may not know, so those aren't the nicer or more pleasant times. But typically, what we try to do is try to have a good starting basis, and this is something that I kind of learned in my stint during Singapore, working with Stefano Scavone. He is in UC Berkeley. So we would always start up with, like, based on his advice, that we'd start up with, like, what do we really want? Okay, what is the, like, if you want the moon and the stars, let's start off at that point, and then we can make adjustment based on practicalities, based on what's necessary, what's not, and then finally arrive at something that is both feasible and would also answer the questions that we have in mind. Like, it could be that very simple example. Let's say there is a field research and you had to choose between temperature and humidity. But most sensors with the same price will give you both. And if you have both data, it could be useful later for you or maybe someone else who is working on something similar. So measure both. But whereas if you wanted to have something more like, let's say, black carbon or ozone, so those are costlier alternatives. So there has to be a really good reason as to why I want that. And if I have that good reason, I might as well spend the money to get it, because otherwise I'm not answering my basic question.
Yeah.
So it has to be like, you start with assuming you have all the resources and then narrow down to what you really need to answer your questions.
Yeah. Now I know what you mean. I'll have you back to the podcast in just a minute, but I wanted to tell you briefly about Imbiot, a partner of the podcast. I came across Imbiot a while ago, and in fact, completely unrelated to the podcast had been trying out some of their sensors here in my office, which I still have here today, and with customers. I was seriously impressed then and remain so. Imbiot are a multidisciplinary team with a common goal to promote healthy and sustainable interior spaces. They manufacture smart indoor air quality monitors and an exceptional cloud platform. I get to see and use many products, as you could imagine, and Imbiot stands out here. The quality of the product, the innovation they bring with sensors and connectivity options, and a platform with some unique approaches to reporting and integration with many of the reference standards in the sector like Reset, Well, Lead and others. Their devices can also be integrated to any building to control and automate the operation of HVAC systems, ensuring optimal air quality and energy savings. Details are in the show notes as always, and at airqualitymatters.net and at Imbiot. That's INBIOT.ES. Now, back to the podcast. It's probably an impossible question to answer, but can you walk me through what a typical research project looks like for a researcher? Like, what's the life cycle of a research? And as, in your field, in this built environment field where you're looking at air quality and thermal comfort and so on, has it typically had a duration as well? So like, have you found that typical research you've been involved in has been a 2 or 3 year project and it has this kind of a pattern, or is it just too varied?
I guess I can start with the end of your question. So
Yeah.
there isn't a typical life cycle for a project. So it really depends on what kind of project it is. And so like I was involved in a project which was retrofitting a zero energy building to a plus energy building. That, I mean, including my involvement of around 2.5 years, that thing was probably 6 years. And that's not typical, but that
Yeah.
can happen because it's a big project. There are a lot of levels of approvals to get and finalize. So that could happen, but at the same time, it could be something which is simple enough and gets completed within 8 months. So typically, when you would start off with, or rather, let me put it this way. So we have this overarching goal of looking at healthy, sustainable buildings. And so within that, we would have some ideas we're passionate about, like the one I was talking about, like so classroom studies, but with engagement of the children. So that is some idea that I had in the back of my head, and just a few paragraphs of it. So maybe you write it down. So that's a good idea. That's something Jan taught me, that so whenever you have an idea, you make a note of it and have kind of a SWOT analysis of it, like have it there ready, so that the next time some funding opportunity comes up, so the next funding opportunity comes up, you say that, okay, this idea fits with this opportunity, and I could get so much and such things done with this funds that would be available. So then you start kind of expanding on the brief idea that you had. And it's always a nice thing to have a attractive acronym at this point.
Yeah.
So you can
Something that sticks.
Yeah. And so and then you
which is rare, I've found in research, people coming up with names that people don't go, really? You couldn't think of something better? The curse of research is people coming up with poor acronyms.
And so then you expand that a bit, try to align your idea with what the funding body or funding organization wants, and hope that it gets through. And
that's a good point you raised there, actually. And I suppose none of this happens without money. And like the starting line is, can I get somebody to pay for this idea?
Yeah.
Isn't it? And so whether you're fitting that idea within a frame of available research funding that becomes up from time to time and from certain bodies, or a particular university is looking at a particular area, or has a school that's looking at a particular area. But that's point A, isn't it? Is like, yes, I've got an idea, but ideas are only ideas until somebody's prepared to put some money behind this. And that will frame what you can do, I guess, as well, the available funding.
I mean, I guess it's a good thing, as we discussed previously, that this area of research is quite kind of in contact with the end users.
Yeah.
So generally, the ideas that we would have has a relevant end goal or a relevant endpoint with, okay, these are the users who would be affected, or these are the users who want a solution to this problem, and this is what it would be, we would be providing them with.
Yeah.
So that helps in a lot of the situations of obtaining the funding, because we can convince that this isn't something that we just dreamt up of. This is a real situation. There's a problem that exists, and this is how we intend to address it.
Yeah.
And once you have the funding, then it's, of course, it goes down to getting the required approvals, then planning out when you're going to do what. If you need to buy stuff, buy them, deploy them, get some data. If you want to ask questions, ask the questions. But like, you have to treat all of this as instruments, and study design has to be quite rigorously done. Otherwise, you will end up wasting your time, and you will end up wasting the time of the participants or the stakeholders, which is worse. Like, your time you want to waste, fine.
Yeah.
But if you disappoint the, like, let's say it's a classroom, the stakeholders would be the school, the teachers, even the student kids. It's really loathsome to disappoint them or waste their time, because next time you want them, they won't be there for you.
That's a really good point. And Sarah West made that point really well in the podcast. She's a citizen science specialist, and she makes the point that there's got to be something in participation for people. Yes. People will only participate so many times if there's nothing in return. And if you make that experience bad for them, then you're much less likely to be able to go back to that well to do further research. And that's something we haven't touched on, is that often these ideas come out of stuff that you were doing previously. So nearly always at the end of this stuff, you're going, we didn't quite answer that. We need to, so these things don't just happen in isolation. They happen as a result of years of something not quite answering something.
Yeah.
And if you, like you say, if you need to involve office workers or school children or whatever, you owe it to them that it's well thought through and has an impact. Otherwise, you can't encourage people to participate.
I mean, it could be something, it doesn't always have to be something physical or monetary that they gain from the experience. It could just be that you are paying attention to what they're saying, you are taking them seriously, and you're not dismissing them outright. So even that experience that, yes, we are being heard, our voices are important to this field, to this research, that also helps. It's just to create a conducive environment, create a kind of a safe environment where they can express themselves, where they feel that their experience, their perception is important, and they're not just there just to complete this and somehow tick some boxes.
Yeah.
So
and as Sarah said, it's very difficult sometimes to anticipate what people are going to get out of it. She had a body of research. I can't remember. It was looking at mushrooms or butterflies or something, where they were getting participation from people. And the thing that most of them reflected on was that it got them out of the house and forced them to go for walks, and they enjoyed being with nature. So the benefits they got from that citizen science wasn't what the citizen science thought they were going to get out of it at the beginning. But if you're engaging properly, what you don't want is that poor rigor, meaning you don't get outcomes out of it. You want something at the end of it. And I guess at the end of all of this, you're trying to answer questions. Invariably, you have to write this up. So if you've not done it properly, it's going to be critically reviewed anyway, particularly if it's peer reviewed. So you're under pressure to have something that's
I'll tell you something funny. So apart from the peer review part, or apart from getting it published, if you haven't properly done it, you will find it difficult writing it down yourself, because you would have forgotten what you did. Yes, like starting from the application of the grant to the end, even in a small project, it could be a year. And if you do not have this kind of steps of how you did it and what you did, when you write the final report, it can get quite tiresome.
Yeah. What's your favorite bit of research? What's your favorite part of research? Where do you find yourself in the purple patch where you're loving it and this is why you did it, compared to the bits where you're for Friday evening at 10 o'clock going, this is a shit job. Why did I ever do this? This is, what's the bits you really enjoy? Where are you on fire in research?
It's kind of counterintuitive for me because I mean, I am, in most of my normal life, I'm introverted. I'm actually on the spectrum. So I don't really like a lot of human interaction, but the only time I do it and I love it is when I'm talking about this kind of things like public engagement. So that's one thing that attracts me. The other thing is looking at data. It's kind of an odd thing to say, but it's sometimes like even data that has been gathered as part of other projects. So it's especially with the kind of computational tools that we have available today and the kind of experience that I've gained through working with people from different disciplines like psychologists, public health specialists, engineers, architects. So sometimes that gives me that kind of multiple perspectives to look at the data, which can be quite fascinating. So I don't know if I should say. So this is something that's under preparation right now, but commonly the idea was that thermal comfort is normally the modeling is it's kind of a linear thing. Like so, when you're moving from, let's say, cool to slightly cool, it's the same response that would be required from slightly cool to neutral. That's how the typical model has been thought of, especially for field research. So recently we're looking at field research data, but from the idea that like, why should that be true? It's more likely that at the extremes there will be probably smaller changes in temperature needed to change the perception. So let's look at it that way. And specifically, we're looking at the differences between school classrooms versus university classrooms because of the age difference. And so then you see certain differences that, yeah, school students, they respond in a slightly different manner, especially at the extremes, which means that we need to be more considerate or we need to look at it more carefully when we're designing a school classroom as opposed to a university classroom, because the age is different. There are more opportunities to adapt to their environment, and they can be more assertive. Like if they're not comfortable, they'll probably leave the class. That's not true for a school child. So those are like it's the looking at the data, but from a human perspective.
Interesting. Yeah, and I was only talking to a lady yesterday who has come alive in social housing predominantly because she started looking at data, and she's been fascinating to watch her journey, discovering how housing works through the eyes of data, with the experience of having to manage those tenants as well. And it's been really interesting to see how the excitement she has around data. For you, is it I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but is it the hard data you like, the sensor data, the numbers? Do you like the softer data, the questionnaires, the cognitive performance studies, that is it a combination of it all? Is it just the beauty of trying to stitch it all together and see patterns? And is it that the bit that you enjoy, that kind of collecting stuff from the built environment and trying to see what's going on in some way?
I think it's a combination of both. And okay, so one thing I would always advise anyone who's starting on this field is that have clear objectives of what you want with the data. Okay, whenever you have a massive amount of data, and these days it is very easy to get a massive amount of data, it's very easy to go down rabbit holes and see, oh, that's a correlation that I see. I want to explore that.
Causation versus correlation,
Yeah.
and you put enough data together, there'll be patterns in everything.
I mean, even if leaving aside the causation and correlation part, it's just that if you get distracted, there is a lot in the data that can distract you from the original
Yes.
questions that you started to try to answer. And it's a waste of time. Like, it could be a very interesting idea, it could be a very interesting correlation, but leave it aside for someone else to explore, or maybe you can explore it, but after we have done
After you've
what
done your
you did.
job.
Yes. So otherwise, it's very easy to get distracted by large data.
I get the sense you're speaking from personal experience,
Yeah.
that you've
So that's
4 hours later on a Wednesday evening, you're going, what am I doing? Like, no, hang on a minute. That's not,
So that's something you start up doing. Like, during my PhD, I've done that a lot of times, and but that's kind of what you learn with experience. As I have this experiment. This is my experiment design, and I hopefully have collected enough data to answer my questions, and then have a look at the data. That, okay, again, that will tell you that do you have enough data to answer the questions that you started out to answer, and then you can think of what kind of models to use to look at correlations or not. So it's important to think of who you are doing it for, like the occupants, what age group they are, what is their background, which climate are they acclimatized to, and what are the situations, like how much control do they have of their environment. Then look at the kind of instruments that you have used, like have you measured temperature, humidity, CO2 levels, door and window openings, and at the same time, like instrumentation, like surveys, like what kind of survey should I use? Should I use the same survey for elderly people as opposed to for children? And how can I make my surveys more interesting for children so that we get consistent responses from them? So you have to think of these things, then look at the data, and then you think of, okay, this is what I have, and these are the questions that I need to answer. So maybe I will use this model or this kind of correlation to get to my answer. Like, before you even looking at the data, or before even considering who your end users are, if you fixate on a model, or if you fixate on a process that, I'm going to find a correlation, I'm going to then do a linear regression, and then I'm going to have a model. So that kind of, it may not work always for this kind of this field where it's very much involved with occupants. It's not just buildings, it's not just inanimate HVAC systems. It's a combination of the built environment, the systems, and the people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what makes it eternally fascinating for people, is that mix of scenarios. I was fascinated to hear you say you enjoy, particularly as somebody maybe not as that comfortable communicator talking, that you actually enjoy that part of it. Unpack that for me a little bit. Is it a sense of achievement in communicating results? Is it that invariably you're connecting with other people in the field when you're talking about what you're doing in research and so on? Because communicating in science is one of the things, is why I exist doing the podcast, but it's one of the things we don't do very well. We're very poor at getting this knowledge that we're learning out there in ways that's meaningful for people. What do you think it is that you enjoy in the communicating your work piece? Do you think?
So this, like, I once heard a TED talk where the person speaking was, I related to him because he said that I love giving a lecture, but then after that I need 30 minutes of alone time to recover. Okay, so I related to that. So I do need that alone time to recover, because like, this isn't normal or natural for me. But what I enjoy particularly about it is trying to put the knowledge basis that we have in as simple a form to communicate as possible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I strongly believe that, I mean, this is engineering. This isn't some, okay, it's not what relativistic mechanics that I can't explain to a 8-year-old.
No.
So I should be able to do that. If I am not able to do that, then maybe I do not understand it well enough myself, or I haven't thought of good enough representation, good enough analogy, or good enough form to communicate it.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge which I have to overcome. And once I feel that I have it in a form which can make it easy to communicate, then I'm happy about it, and I want to show it off that, okay, this is how it
Yeah,
works.
but I think that's so true in general. There's something very cathartic about being able to express the complex in terms that everybody can understand. Because I think you have to go through a process yourself of understanding something deeply enough to be able to express it in a way that's understandable.
Right.
Because you can always tell when people don't fully understand the subject. They struggle to simplify it. They struggle to, I think it was Feynman, wasn't it, that spoke about that, you know. I think it is a generally very cathartic thing to be able to do, and a process you have to think about if you're going to do properly.
Right.
And we see people do it poorly. You know, there's plenty of academics that can't bring it down and communicate it at a level where you inspire or you generate ideas, because we do that through storytelling and through simplicity and plain English. We're never going to do that with a big equation on a board, you know, showing off. You know, nobody. Although I did notice, actually, I was at a conference there the other day, and somebody put up one of those ridiculous equations on the screen that only people that don't want people to know what they're doing put up on a PowerPoint presentation. I took a photo of it and I uploaded it into AI and said, could you explain this for me simply? It looked at the picture, understood the equation, and presented it to me in plain English in a way that I understood. And I was like, that was the first time I've ever done that in anger. I knew it was possible, but it's the first time I've actually been in a conference where, you know, we all do it, don't we? We see a slide come up and you take a photo of it. And what I would have done in the past, if I'd have remembered post the conference, which I very rarely did, was I'd send it to somebody that I knew about it and asked, could they explain it to me? But you'd have to wait for them not to be busy to be able to do it. Whereas this was done in 30 seconds. It was a photo and it explained it perfectly. And I showed it to the person that put it up on the slide. And I said, is that right? And he went, wow, yeah, that's amazing. So like times are changing, I think, for things like that.
Also further evidence that a lot of things that we might think are complicated are not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's a bunch of complex mathematical equations behind why opening a window works.
Sure.
Okay. But those aren't really a concern of a person who's going to open a window or who's going to decide if I should or shouldn't open the window. Right.
Yeah.
So you can then the idea is to convey to them, like, when should they open the window, or how do you tell them that opening the window might not work in a certain situation. Talk in simple terms, like if there is a wind, if there is a temperature difference, like if it is warmer outside, then you are more likely to gain more benefit from opening the window. Or yes, it's even complex equations would have simple interpretations that if the AI can tell you, then you should be able to do that for your audience as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I just really liked your explanation of that. And also, I think a lot of people can also appreciate the going finding a quiet room for 20 minutes after you've been in front of a load of people talking, because it's not a comfortable thing, I think, for most people, to be fair. Tell me a little bit about the work you're doing at the moment then. I mean, we've spoken a lot about the process of research, and I thank you for that, actually, because as I said to you at the beginning of the podcast, very often in these conversations, we're talking about the subject itself, and very rarely, I think, have we paused to think about the process of researching and why people would do it and what they get value out of it. I suppose before we jump on, just to finish that conversation off, is this a job you'd recommend to people? Like, or do you think people have to find a passion and be pulled to it because it's just so torturous that you've got to have a passion for the subject matter to bear it? Or you would actually say to somebody at the age of 15, researching is the career you want? Like, is the job of researching a job that you generally recommend to people?
I
That's
wouldn't recommend unless you are passionate about a certain topic, and it could be any topic, and you can enjoy working on that. And so it doesn't have to be engineering. It could be arts, sciences, literature, whatever fascinates you. I guess that's true for a lot of jobs, that you're passionate about what you want to do. And then, like, if you have a real passion for what's behind the research, then you would enjoy the process as well, because that process is helping you get deeper into something that you love or like.
yeah.
Otherwise, as you said, it can be quite torturous.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose that's true of most vocational type careers, is
Yeah.
that people find themselves doing it because they're pulled to answering or in service of something. They can't help it.
Like, we had a kind of funny theory, like I was discussing this with Pavel, that people who work on indoor air quality, they are typically also people who are sensitive to indoor environments, and they might have this more sensitive to smells.
Yeah.
And people who are more sensitive to lighting, except they work on lighting. So this is
Yeah, you wonder that, or whether it's chicken and egg. Are you sensitive because you know, or are you encouraged to know
in
because
my
you're sensitive?
Yes, I know that I was sensitive before, because so this is, I think I was in grade 10, so that would be like the second year before leaving cert
Yeah.
So we were in a kind of a computer classroom, and it was air conditioned. So air conditioned, but with split AC, so no ventilation. And I suddenly started feeling quite feverish. And then when I went outside, it got fine. I thought maybe because it was due to nervousness or whatever. But later, like, when you come into this field and you discover that, okay, that was sick building syndrome. So I am amongst it, but something like 5 to 10% people who suffer from sick building syndrome. And quite recently, like in 2020, yeah, we're doing a study related to CO2, impact of CO2, and as opposed to impact of poor ventilation. So I knew that on the days when ventilation was low, on that day I would start to feel like it was a 2.5 hours study, and I was there with the people. So by the end of on the days when the ventilation was low, I would be feeling feverish, I would be having a headache. And once it is over, so I step out, stand outside for 15 minutes, I'm all good. So
Yeah, it's funny when you look back, isn't it, with the knowledge that you have.
yeah.
Yeah, obviously this stuff has seemed so obvious to you now. Yeah. What are you working on now? What you mentioned it, you're doing work with public health.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the purpose of the research
I
at the
think
moment?
it was in 2022. So the research I learned, I think then it was Irish research, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So HRB, EPA, and Research Ireland, they came together to along with MSCA. So they had this idea to start a funding scheme, and it was called Dorothy Co-Found Scheme. The idea was to have cross-disciplinary research to look at or on handling the challenges related to public health in the future. I guess it was inspired by pandemic, and during pandemic, a lot of different disciplines had to come together to face off the challenges. So the idea was that let's get started on preparation rather than just being responsive. So there we made a case that public health is impacted by your indoor environment, specifically from our experience, indoor climate related to thermal comfort and air quality. And so let's look at what can we do for specifically for classrooms in terms of the design, so that we can be better prepared the next time there is a challenge to the indoor climate of a classroom. So that, like, if we are faced with a challenge like a pandemic, or let's say a forest wildfire, the quick solution should not be that we shut down schools. The longer term investment or the goal should be that we have classrooms which can deal with these challenges, like if it
Interesting.
requires.
So is that kind of moving towards things like they did with ASHRAE 241,
Yeah.
like these kind of responsive,
Yeah.
preparing to be responsive to events?
Right.
So, certain modes that a school might have a normal mode and then have a
Enhanced
pandemic
mode,
mode or
yeah.
whatever it is. So you're looking at that kind of a thing, are
Yeah.
you?
So
Okay,
it could
interesting.
be related to, like, once we started looking at it, so it was apparent that yes, you can have certain engineering measures, like you can have a pandemic mode, or you can have a forest fire mode, or you can even have a heat wave mode
Hmm.
for a classroom. And at the same time, to support these engineering interventions, you would need some kind of guidance related to management and policy in place. Like a classroom, sorry, a school could have someone who is responsible for these aspects, like let's say periodically monitoring the air quality in a classroom, or making sure that whatever are these instruments, let's say air filters or sensors or UV lights that are to be used in emergency event, they are in proper order. And then there's also awareness amongst the students and teachers as to what's important about air quality in classrooms, or what
Okay.
affects those aspects.
So is there a goal to have a certain output from this then, or is it just a general research into the area?
So,
Is it like a grand literature review in a way, or are you actually trying to answer a specific question or have a particular outcome?
the outcome that we want to have would be kind of a matrix of solutions that we recommend that, okay, these are, let's say, policy related measures that need to be implemented. These are like everyday managing the building related measures. These are certain active measures that you might have. These are certain passive measures that you might have during design phase or during operational phase.
Interesting.
And then based on your situation, based on what's available to you, based on your resources, you can choose something that's appropriate for your case. So there is, as part of this fellowship, there is also a secondment to the Department of Education, where hopefully we get to know more about what goes into design guidelines for classrooms, and how it could be improved, or how we can make some changes to that based on what we have found. And at the same time, what are the current goals in terms, because they are also impacted by the climate plans and climate goals of Ireland. So it has to be a synchronization between the energy related goals and health related goals. Otherwise, neither one is going to work.
Yeah, interesting. And is it how multidisciplinary is this particular research? You've got public health people in there,
Yeah.
also kind of EPA type people as well. You've got yourself engineering and environmental science in there. Are there others? Are there other
So
disciplines in the research that you're doing?
primarily, so we have people from public health from UCC, people from the side of engineering, that is me and Powell from DTU. And then you have on the policy and implementation side, the Department of Education's the planning and building unit. So
Okay,
these are the three major pillars of this
interesting.
work.
And is it just Ireland focused, this particular research? Because you said Pavel was involved in it though. So Pavel's you brought in to look at
Yes.
the Irish
Yeah, yeah.
context. Okay, interesting. So
I mean,
this,
we hope that whatever we come up with, it would have more wider applicability, because
yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
there are other similar climates to Ireland, which should have similar requirements. But at the same time, because this is primarily a Irish funded project, so our focus will be on classrooms here, classroom design guidelines, the Department of Education of Ireland. So
Yeah, yeah. And how far into the research are you now? How far into this process is this your full
I have,
time job at the
yeah,
moment?
yeah,
This particular body
yeah,
of research. How far into it are you?
about 1 year left.
1 year left.
Yes.
Okay. Oh yeah, because you said it was running from about 2022. I think that's when the
2023 to
yeah.
2026.
Okay. Okay. So finishes in 2026.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so they have, part of the same program, they have had at least two cohorts of researchers. So there will be people who were recruited later, and they'll be finishing later as well. It's a 3 year program. And so I was part of the first cohort. And so for me, it would be May 2026.
Yeah. And it will culminate in a report to the government and EPA or the body that pulled this together, or will it culminate in academic literature? But
Uh,
what will the outcome of this research be,
there
do you hope?
will be, mm, we had actually three things in mind. One would be academic literature, so we are some way into that. The other thing would be, along with Department of Education, if we can have some kind of policy briefs related to design or even operation of classrooms. So that's something that remains to be seen, like how well we can contribute to their ongoing process. And the other was related to communication to the general public. So where also I would like to think that we are uh, pretty much in a decent place, because during this period it allowed me to work on pieces for the RTE brainstorm, pieces for conversation, so which just delve into like basics of indoor air quality. And also, like, typically we start up with set up the situation, set up the problem, and end up with a few guidelines, a few simple to follow ideas, simple to follow rules that can help you improve your air quality or improve your thermal comfort. So yeah, just today I was thinking that, okay, it's rainy right now, but last week was unusually warm. Next few weeks are also going to be unusually warm, and this summer, probably like the past years, is also going to be the warmest year on record. One of the pieces that I did for brainstorm was related to how to stay safe during a summer. Like, even if the temperature is not going to go beyond 30, but that's unusual for Irish weather, and that
Yeah.
is enough for like children or the elderly to suffer from heat stroke. So what are the simple preventive measures that you can take at home or at offices to stay safe? So I should probably repost it.
Yeah, interesting. Was there anything else particularly you thought might be useful to discuss today? That's it. We talked about healthy buildings in India on
Yeah.
the short video, so I don't think there's any need to go there. Look, for me, I think it's been a really fascinating insight into the work of a researcher, how you'd find yourself in this space, some of the kind of work that you find yourself doing, and the kind of person you'd want to be to do it. So I can't thank you enough for your time. I think it's been a really interesting, it's been certainly very insightful for me. And like I say, I spend a lot of my time talking to researchers, but never really stopped to ask them about researching
Right.
as such. So that's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you about. That's it.
Good to
Thanks a
know that.
million. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for listening. Before you go, can I ask a favour? If you enjoyed the podcast and know somebody else who might be interested, do spread the word and let's keep building this community. This podcast was brought to you in partnership with Aereco, Aico, Ultra Protect, Imbiot, and 21 Degrees, all great companies who share the vision of the podcast and aren't here by accident. Your support of them helps them support this show. Do check them out in the links and in the show notes and at airqualitymatters.net. And don't forget to check out the YouTube channel by the same name, with plenty more content due to come on that channel. Thanks very much. See you next week.